Good evening, welcome to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire. Just like the Edinburgh clubs on Saturday, we've braved the cold and the rain in the hope of a successful outcome tonight, but much more on that later. So for now, we'd like to let you know that you can get in touch with us at facebook.com/Monday Night Football, FITBA, or at MN Football on Twitter with any talking points or questions that arise over the next hour, and we'll do our best to cover them. With that said, let's get to our opening question, and quickly, because we've got a very important guest on the line waiting throughout this, who will get involved in a couple of minutes. So the opening question: Hearts defender and Edinburgh's foremost pre-scandal Rolf Harris lookalike, Callum Patterson, has been called into the Scotland squad for the games against Republic of Ireland and England. Now, regardless of your personal thoughts on Patterson as a potential Scotland right back of the future, it's caused a wee bit of controversy in Edinburgh, given his, shall we say, indifferent start to the season, and it stirred up a wee debate on what makes you deserving of a Scotland call-up. With that in mind, I'd like to know, in your opinion, which current or former player from your club was most deserving of international recognition but failed to receive it. Connor, as the lone Hibby again, you're back to that status. What are your thoughts on this matter?
If Strachan's just pulled names out of a hat, then it's good to see that he's included in the championship teams as well. I think, given his current run of form, Scott Allan is a particularly strong candidate for meriting a shout in the Scotland squad if he continues to play the way he is. I mean, obviously it's possibly too early to tell, but he's been man of the match for like 5 or 6 games now, and it almost goes without saying. I mean, I wasn't even really going to talk about him later on when we discuss the Hibs game, because really it's just the same performance every week. He's just outstanding, and if he keeps that up, you kind of worry that he might not be at Hibs for much longer, because he'll definitely be attracting attention from elsewhere. So I would say, and on Patterson, I mean, it is a bit of a strange shout, because if Strachan's chosen him based on the one game that I know he was at, which is the Derby. I mean, was he looking at the Derby thinking that's the man that I'm going to pick out of the under-21s? And I have seen Patterson play in the under-21s before, and he was okay. I mean, Scotland lost 6-1, I think, so he wasn't brilliant, but I don't think Billy Stark was doing a great job. But it is good to see some of the under-21s players being brought through. So even if it is Patterson, it's good to see that maybe there's going to be a better link to the full team.
Every team needs a wild card, so maybe that's what Strachan's thinking after that lunge.
I can kind of see where Strachan's going with this. He's thinking long term. It would be good to get these boys. I'm certain there's no chance he's got any possibility of getting in actually onto the field. So it's just to sort of let him see the setup behind the scenes and go off with the team. So I can kind of see where Strachan's coming from, although there are obviously a few better shouts. Historically, Hibs player that I was quite surprised to see only had one cap was Keith Wright, and that was a friendly against Northern Ireland. So that seems like a bit of a shame. I thought maybe around that 93-94 period when Scotland had failed to qualify for the World Cup, he maybe would have got a few goals around then. So that's one historically. I feel like he could have had a better bite of the apple.
Well, that's a period that our guest in a couple of minutes can certainly shed a lot of light on, that period of football. Scott, what do you think?
2 players I thought. The first one was Tosh McKinley, and then I remembered that he only had to play for Celtic twice after leaving Hearts before he actually got a Scotland cap.
There's a few that fall into that category.
Definitely.
The poor man's Ryan Giggs is certainly there with them.
And then there was definitely also Stevie Fulton. Probably would have been the sort of Charlie Adam sort of player that would have
overweight.
It might have been quite a polarising sort of Scotland player, where some people would have admired him for his passing ability, but others probably would have lamented him for his lacky movement. So it would have been interesting to have seen how he would have got on in a Scotland jersey.
Newcomers to Monday Night Football.
Hello.
Darren, what do you think?
I was racking my brains for anyone that was in the sort of last 10 years, but then I realised that we had that faceless cast of thousands, and there were not really any Scotland candidates for a while then. So I actually went back to the same sort of era. I thought Tosh McKinley as well before he went to Celtic, but also Steve Frail, who I think, had he not got injured, probably would have made it into the squad. But obviously got a terrible injury, and that was kind of him done. But I was quite surprised that he never got called up at the time, because I don't think we had that many right backs at the time.
It's never really been a position of strength, which is maybe what we're seeing at the moment with Patterson being called up. Well, mine's that I've gone for slightly more comic relief answers. I thought Andy Driver, just because I feel quite sorry for him. I mean, that rule is called the Andy Driver rule, and he still couldn't get in based on it. That was particularly harsh. And the other one, just because it recalls a classic moment in radio history, was Anthony Niemi getting called up for Scotland. But Anthony Niemi, he's Finnish. He's not finished, he's only 29. on that poor comedy, let's bring our guest in. Allan Preston, have you managed to last throughout that?
Yeah, that was very good. Some of the names of the past were quite funny as well. Listening to one or two of the guys there, but I've got to agree with the young guy from Hib Supporter Corner there that Scott Allan's been fantastic, although I was thinking the past 18 months he's only played maybe about 20 games, but if he keeps on the form he's on at the moment with Hibs, I'm sure it could be on Gordon Strachan's thoughts. I think he's a terrific young player. As far as Patterson's concerned, I think he's in the Lewis McLeod boat that Gordon's brought him into the squad just to basically have a look at him, just to settle him into the squad. I don't think he'll be involved as such. He may be a substitute and get on against England. It would be great for the young lad, but I think he's just there for one for the future. So if Strachan does need him going forward, he's not scared of being involved with the bigger players that are in and around the Scotland first team.
Good to know your thoughts on that one. So let's get started on your own career. In true Monday Night Football fashion, I'd like to start, as we mean to go on, with a question based on spurious gossip and rumours. So I was told today by someone that I work with that you apparently or allegedly broke your leg when playing for Leith Academy against Boroughmuir when you were under 15. Can you confirm it? Is that lies or is that true?
That's complete lies.
It's complete lies.
Yeah.
Gordon
I
Murray.
never played against Boroughmuir. I broke my leg, yes, but when I was 12 and I got run over by a motor car when I was 12-year-old, I broke my leg then, but never again did I break my leg playing for the school or anything like that.
That's obviously where that urban legend has come from then. It's transferred itself onto the football pitch. Did that ever come back to haunt you further in your career, Alan, that broken leg?
Well, I don't know. I had to retire at the age of 29 at St Johnstone and have my hip resurfaced, which is basically chopping off the hip bone and replacing it with a titanium hip bone, which I've got. And then last year I just got my other hip done, so I'm walking about like Metal Mickey with both titanium hips just now. So I don't know if it's something to do with the accident when I was 12, but my hips deteriorated quite rapidly, and as I say, I had to retire from professional football at 29, which is a real disappointment, because I felt I was physically fit and I could have continued to 34, 35 if I was lucky. But having to retire at 29 was very difficult.
OK, well, let's move quickly on to a more positive note in your career then, Alan. After your start at Dundee United, we know that you were fortunate enough to get the opportunity to play for the club you supported as a boy. But unlike probably the majority of players who achieved that goal, you were in the position of joining the team as an established professional rather than coming through the youth setup. What were the differences or advantages or disadvantages of being in that position rather than coming through the youth setup at Tynecastle?
Well, if you're a youth player at whatever club you're at, you don't get treated the same as a player that's come in, because the manager brings in more senior players, and it was Joe Jordan that brought me into Hearts at the time. And for me, coming into a changing room with Craig Levine, John Robertson, Gary Mackay, guys like that you see week in and week out, and legends in the Hearts world. Rob was a real close friend of mine. We've been on holiday together, and that friendship was born when I signed for Hearts. But he was a hero of mine, fantastic, and I still believe to this day that he'd have scored more goals than Ali McCoist if he had been in a successful Hearts team, because McCoist was in a successful Rangers team that were getting to the latter stages of cup competitions, winning trophies and all the rest of it. And I believe if Robbo had played, had the same success at club level, he would have scored more goals, because I thought he was a better finisher, more natural goal scorer. But when you go to a club, if you're brought in as a senior player, as I was, it's a lot easier. At that time, I had Gary Locke, Alan Johnson, Paul Ritchie, all these guys, Grant Murray, but they were all on the ground staff as young kids cleaning your boots, and they've gone on to have fantastic careers, some of them. But at that time at Hearts, it was just a really good club. It was well drilled. Joe Jordan was very disciplined. Frank Connor was his assistant. And then round about that, Sandy Clark was taking the young boys who really were brilliant. They went on to win the Youth Cup that year at Ibrox. They were sensational. So it was a real good club and a real good feel factor at that point, albeit Wallace Mercer was the owner at the time, and he was a bit eccentric at times, but such a lovely man, and really had the club at heart.
You spoke a wee bit there about the friendship that kind of quickly struck up between yourself and wee Robbo. Did being a local lad really help you settle into that dressing room? Would that have been different if you had come, as some did, from completely outside, or was every new signing kind of welcomed into that dressing room?
Well, you're very welcomed, because you had played against them as well, which also helped. So the characteristics of most of them, having played against them. And I knew Sandy Clark because I played against him, and you know, him and Robbo, when they played together, they used to do the crossover throw-in where if I was getting marked by, if I was marking Sandy and someone was marking Robbo, him and Robbo would cross, and Sandy would run into Robbo's man. Inevitably, it would be me, and Sandy broke my nose one time when he whacked into me as they were crossing over. These little things that happened in games, you knew the people. Johnny Miller was there at the time, Ali Mauchline, Ian Baird was there, Hoggy was there. It was a real good changing room to come into, and they made you very, very welcome right at the start. They were really good.
You mentioned Ian Baird there. I know that my colleague Scott here has got a question that focuses specifically on him. Do you want to fire away with that one, Scott?
It's not about a Christmas night out, is it?
No, well, I've heard anything.
No, but we may ask for that story next.
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask what your memories were of Ian Baird's sort of, well, either famous or infamous appearance in goal up at Pittodrie. I know you weren't involved yourself that day, but I was wondering if you were actually up there watching that match.
No, I wasn't up there. Ian Baird was a strange character. He struck up a wonderful partnership with Robbo, where he would take all the bunts and the kicks off the centre half.
Yeah.
You know, do really well, and then Robbo would tap it in from a yard and get all the status as a hero, and rightly so. But Ian was a very tough guy. You know, him and the director of football at Hearts I've got now, Craig Levine, did see eye to eye, and you know, they rubbed each other up the wrong way. And as I said, Christmas nights out were, you know, there was one that was just quite memorable where we were almost coming to blows. It was a real free for all, and Bairdy was at the centre of it all. We'd had too much to drink, but he was a nice guy, and he was one of these lads like Ali Mauchline you would like to have on your team rather with you than against you. He was just a real good finisher, he really was.
So I take it, I mean, did he ever actually train in goals at any point? Was there any plan in knowing that, you know, if there was an injury to the keeper that he would be the goalie, or was it just sort of off the cuff?
He would go in. He would go in quite a lot. I mean, a lot of the lads, they would fancy their chances at times. Robbo was a decent enough keeper as well at times. But Bairdy was the one that we knew if something went wrong, that Bairdy would be going in the goals. You know, he was brave as an outfield player, so we knew he would go on and dive at strikers' feet if needed be. So, no, he played in goals, not a lot, but you know, when you knew at times that if you needed him, he would certainly be in there.
That's good. It is one of the few games I've still got on VHS, the sports scene highlights. And to be fair to Bairdy, he did actually lose 3 less goals than I think it was Nicky Walker who was in goals the previous visit up at Pittodrie, so he didn't do too bad.
Making the shortbread at the time.
Yeah, one of the other questions I wanted to ask you about that time was obviously the deal that you were involved in when you came to Hearts. It was a sort of swap deal and obviously money for Scott Crabb. Did that make the move more difficult, knowing that there was a guy who was leaving, who it was quite public at the time that he didn't actually want to leave Hearts, and that Joe Jordan was possibly forcing him out? Did that make that harder for you, making that move?
Well, it didn't for me, because I didn't know the circumstances at the time. You know, all I knew was that Hearts wanted to sign me, and that was the case. But Crabble was a brilliant Hearts player, and he's still a good lad. I don't see him regularly, but when I do, you know, he's very welcoming. He's a nice guy. It was very difficult. It was more difficult for him to leave Hearts than it was for me to leave Dundee United. Without a doubt, I was coming home. He was going to a new town that he'd have to settle into, a new club. But for me, it was me. I was coming back home, so it was easier for me. But Scott went on and done really well for Dundee United. He was a top lad, real good pro, wonderful player, absolutely wonderful player. And I was never signed to replace Scott Crabb. We were two different players completely. You know, I was more of a winger type, and he was more for me. He was more of a centre forward. So I was never brought in specifically to replace Scott Crabb. You know, it was just one of the things that happened. But I could certainly feel the anger of the Hearts fans, but not towards me, but more towards Joe Jordan more than anything else for letting Crabble go.
In terms of that atmosphere at the club, Alan, the animosity that was growing in the stands towards Joe Jordan, that culminated later in the season that you were at the club, although I don't think you were actually involved in the game, in the 6-0, the 6-0 defeat at Brockville. What was your experience of that from the outside? Did you see that coming? Any defeat like that, you know, for a club like Hearts, with all due respect to Falkirk, that shouldn't have come. Albeit Falkirk at that time had a good side, but you know, Hearts should never be losing 6-0 to Falkirk. It was very difficult because Joe had brought me in.
And when you're a new signing and the manager that brings you in, you give your all for him because he's had faith in you, he's brought you to the club, and you're going to try your best for him. And it was a real sad time because Joe, I mean, he's still working at the moment. He's the right-hand man at Harry Redknapp. He's been at Tottenham, he's been at Portsmouth, he's been all over and had a successful coaching career, Joe. But I just think at that time he had come back from Italy and everything he tried to do was Italian-based. You know, this is how we do it in Italy, this is how we do it in Italy. And I think the players got sick of it, to be honest. And I think further down the line when Joe had more experience, he probably wouldn't mention it as much, but every day it was this is what we do and this is how we do it, and the players just switched off to him in the end, I'm afraid.
So moving on to the most positive moment of your Hearts career, the goal in the Cup semi-final against Rangers. What are your memories of that? What was that experience like for a Jambo scoring in a Cup semi-final?
It was great. I mean, I think my second game in for Hearts, we played Celtic at Parkhead and I scored a shot for the edge of the box, light deflection, and that went in, and that was great. So that was at one end of Parkhead, and then obviously the semi-final of the Cup against Rangers. We played really well in that, opening period, where I thought we deserved to go ahead. It was a great cross-in from Robbo. It was a good move, good cross-in for Robbo, and I managed to get in between, I think it was Dave McPherson and Richard Gough, I'm not 100% sure, and the header went in. And it was just great, it was elation, and people say to you, what do you do when you score a goal like that? For that split second, 2 or 3 seconds, your mind's not your own. And that's how I think it's very difficult when referees book players for silly celebrations, because you don't go out on the park to say this is a celebration I'm going to do. You just don't. So when you score a goal like that in such a big game like that, I wasn't myself for 2 or 3 seconds, and I jumped the billboards and I was away to the Hearts fans before I realised what I was doing. And then getting back to the game itself, when Rangers got a corner where they equalised, it was McLeod had a shot, the referee said it took a deflection and it never. And it was very hard. It was a hard one to take, losing the semi-final 2-1, because we felt we had a good chance. We'd set up really well, we were difficult to beat, and obviously we'd taken the lead. So it was a real disappointment for Rangers to score 2 goals and for us to lose 2-1.
On to a better Cup moment in your career then, once you had finished playing at Livingston. What was it like as a Jambo to beat Hibs in a Cup final 8 years before your actual Hearts managed it themselves?
It was great. It was a good time to be, good and bad times at Livingston, to be honest. We'd gone into administration the night of the semi-final against Dundee, ironically enough, at Easter Road. And we managed to win. It was like a fairy tale. We'd managed to. The club had gone into administration that day. We played the semi-final that night, and we got a last-minute penalty winner for Derek Lilly to put us into the final. And then it was against Hibernian, but we'd had a good record that season against Hibs up in the league so far. They hadn't beaten us. We'd comfortably beaten them. But I remember, I've gone to a shop in down in Leith where I stay, and it was a guy I went to school with, a Hibs supporter, and Darren O'Hara, and he said to me, do you seriously think you'll beat us? I said, yeah, we will. He went, but we'll have 42,000 fans. I said, that's fine, but you'll only have 11 players. You won't win. And that was 3 days before the Cup final. Now, once we got through to the Cup final, the morning of the Cup final, we went to Hampden as the coaching staff do to hang up all the strips. And the night before, Lee Makel, who ex-Hearts player, his father-in-law had sadly passed away, so Lee went away from the hotel. We didn't know if we were getting him back for the game or not, but he turned up in time for the game, which was great. But we'd gone to Hampden to hang the strips up, and we were going to swap. Our kit man was going to swap strips with the Hibs kit man. They'll just give a nice memento to each kit man, but their kit man wasn't there, and we'd asked where he was. He'd forgot the Cup final winning t-shirts. Now, we never had any Cup final winning t-shirts at Livingston, but Hibs had already printed them. They'd already sorted out their marketing for their DVD, and they'd already planned the route for the open deck bus to go down Leith Walk and along Duke Street and up Easter Road. So that was all motivation for our players. Yeah. We went out on the day and we won the game 2-0 quite comfortably. We beat them. And then to top it all off, I come back to Livingston for the open deck bus for Livingston, and it's ex-Hibs legend Benny Brazil that's driving the bus, so it couldn't go any better for me.
That's a very interesting story. Our Hibs listeners, we apologise for that. Just while we're on the subject of Livingston, Alan, Can I get your professional opinion on their fortunes this season? It seems from the outside, it seems to be a struggle. Obviously, there's a lot of former Hearts involvement on the management team there as well. How do you see their season developing?
I think Livingston, if I'm being brutally honest, I've got a bigger picture ahead, which they're financially, again, they're struggling. They're really toiling. You know, they've one of the directors has come out and accused another director of, you know, trying to put the club into administration and not paying tax, and that's going to unfold. And I wouldn't be surprised if Livingston found themselves deducted points further down the line. Hopefully not, because it's a good club. You know, it didn't really work moving it from Meadowbank to Livingston. We were never getting big crowds. The point in the case, we won the League Cup with 7,000 at the final, and the following week we played a league match and there was just over 4,000 at it. You would have thought, you know, that would have been the bounce to kick on and get more punters through the door, but they just didn't turn up. And it's a decent enough location, but every single Saturday there's Hearts and Hibs, Rangers and Celtic fans leaving Livingston to go and watch their teams, and no one's really going to see the club that's where they stay, which is a real pity, because it's a great stadium, as everyone knows, a good pitch, and it's a good club. I think this season it's going to be very difficult for them. I think that, you know, Hearts, Rangers and Hibs will be in 1, 2, 3, and then the next team will be down to try and get in the playoffs, but I think it's going to be very, very challenging for Livingston.
Okay, so moving on to your work now, Alan, with the BBC, can you tell us a wee bit as to how that change of career came about?
Well, when I was manager at Livingston, I worked for a sports management company that's London-based, and when I was manager of Livingston, I had some dealings with the lads that own the company, just to see if I was to want to bring in any of their players, but they were very top end, and they were real. They're probably the biggest football agency. It's a sports management company. They look after golf, cricket, tennis, boxing, TV personalities, but their main line's football. And they look after 450 players in the UK and a lot more worldwide. And probably the most recognisable one that they look after is Gareth Bale, who's obviously the highest transfer fee in the world. But they've got Joe Hart, Lallana, Luke Shaw, all these guys, a lot of the top men that play in the English Premier League. So I got involved with that, and I've worked with them ever since. And then I do obviously my freelance stuff with the BBC, which I love. Gets me to go and see games on a Saturday that I would go and watch anyway, and then I get to give my opinion, which whether a lot of people like it or they don't, most of them don't, but I give what I think is an honest opinion on a Saturday.
So, on the subject of your opinion, Alan, bias is obviously a huge discussion in media coverage of football, particularly Scottish football, and the West Coast bias that's spoken about loads, especially in Edinburgh, as you have been well aware throughout your career as well. You've chosen to deal with that head on, really, by making your allegiances abundantly clear, never hidden the fact that you're a Jambo and that will inform your opinion on that. How do you feel that's worked out for you?
I get slaughtered for everyone, Hearts fans as well. You know, you see on Jambo, it's not that I go on a lot, but people tell me you're on Jambo's kickback, getting slaughtered, and I'm on Hibs.net getting slaughtered, and Rangers and Celtic, but that's part of the job, I'm afraid. You're there to give an opinion. People ask you an honest question, you give an honest answer. A lot of people don't like it, but that's what you're there to do, and that's what I try and do to the best of my ability. A few weeks ago at the Derby, I was saying Hibs were a better team. Hibs should have won on the day. Hearts didn't play well. Hibs were, and that's an opinion whether people like it or not. That was me. I was at the game. I sat and watched the 90 minutes, and that was my opinion. Now, the guy next to me might have a completely different one, but he might not be on the radio. So it's just a pity that you can't please everyone. You try your best, and it used to affect me years ago. It used to really worry me what people would think, but I'm at the stage now where you think, right, okay, you're asked to give an opinion. You must be doing reasonably well, because they keep asking you most weeks to go back on. So your opinion must be valued in certain quarters. So you don't go out to intentionally try and hurt anyone, but you can't. If you put a bow tie on a pig, it's still a pig. So you can't change it. What you see is what you see, and if it's a poor game, I'll say at times the game's really poor, and you've really got to try and talk up the game. But if it's poor, it's poor. You can't kid the punters on.
You mentioned Jambo's kickback there. There was a fascinating question that I thought was asked there with regards to your work with the BBC and feedback, which essentially asked, do you receive any sort of official feedback from anyone at the BBC as to your performance? Is there any kind of appraisal as to what you've done, or mistakes that you made, or areas of improvement, especially for young pundits starting out on that process?
Yeah, without a doubt. You go through and you speak to them. The BBC are great. They put you through courses to try and help you. And I was on a course about a year and a half ago where they take a DVD off your commentary or your summarisation of what you've been doing. And these people try and help you, what you should be doing, taking longer pauses, not talking so quick, trying to get your pronunciation correct. And it's not always easy because you're live on radio, as you fellows will know. You try not to make a mistake, but the emotions of the game at times, it wraps you up in it. I mean, and I remember Derek Ferguson was doing, I think it was a 6-6 game between Motherwell and Hibs. It was incredible just to listen how Fergie, who held himself together. It was very difficult because I don't know how I would have reacted at 6-6 in a game like that. I was at Falkirk a few weeks ago against Malawa, and it was 6-0, and it was great. The goals were flying in, and sometimes your emotions can take over. But the BBC, they do give you feedback. They tell you when you've done well, in their opinion, but they equally tell you when you've not done as well, which is the right thing to do. You need criticised as well as praised.
It certainly is, and we need criticised as well as praised for this radio show, but praise would be nice, more so. But finally, Alan, we can't let you go without talking about the fortunes of the clubs, and particularly getting predictions for you for the season ahead. You touched on it a wee bit earlier. What do you think final league placings for Hearts and Hibs this season?
I think in the next few weeks we'll be able to tell exactly where Hearts are, because the last 2 or 3 games, especially the last 2 games, they've not played particularly well. They didn't play well in the derby, and they didn't play well on Saturday against Raith Rovers. So they need to get back to the form that they were showing earlier, and they need to stop the needless bookings for Blabin and Gomez, who are vital for them. And I think Gomez is one booking away from missing a few games, and Blabin's already been sent off. So these guys are very important for them. Ideally, for me, in my opinion, I would love to see Hearts win in the league. Rangers second or Hibs second, it doesn't really bother me as long as Hearts win the league. That would be the main thing for me. I'd like to see both Edinburgh clubs go back up because it's great. I wouldn't. A lot of people will say, you can't mean that, but I'd like Hearts and Hibs to go up for the simple reason they're derbies. Because if one of them stays down next season, we're not going to have any derbies, and you don't know how long you're going to be down for. We've seen it in the past. Teams like Leeds United, who were at the top playing in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, had dropped down 2 or 3 divisions. Man City, a few years ago, dropped down 2 or 3 divisions. Once you're down there, it's easier to get out first attempt. If you can't get out first attempt, you can be down there for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So I sincerely hope for the Edinburgh that Hearts go up as champions and Hibs go up as playoff winners.
Well, everyone at Monday Night Football certainly agrees with you. The Jambo contingent, we were all amazed at how ecstatic we were when Hibs beat Rangers at Ibrox. No even just for selfish reasons. It just, this idea of Edinburgh football thriving against the odds just seemed to kind of unite everyone. It's actually quite positive. But Alan,
great.
On that,
it's great.
Thanks very much for your time. We really appreciate you
problem, boys.
spending your Monday night with us.
You're doing great.
Thank you very much. Stay tuned with us on Radio Saltire with Monday Night Football. We will be back after this break to discuss the games at the weekend in detail. Thank you.
Radio Saltire is a community radio station located in Trinent and East Lothian. We are looking for presenters and station volunteers of all ages. So if you think you've got what it takes or always wanted to give it a go, we can train you up and give you that opportunity. So please get in touch by emailing info@radiosaltire.org or contact us using the website www.radiosaltire.org, community radio station for Scotland.
And we're back on Monday Night Football, and just like the Hibs listeners, Connor has managed to stay with us throughout that period of Hearts chat there as well. Connor, we understand that you have a lot to tell us about your experience at the weekend.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, trip to Central Park in Cowdenbeath is far more of a physical experience than most football games that I go to. So that's the thing that stands out most. I think a lot of people are quite nostalgic about a lot of these old grounds. I know that. Cowdenbeath's main stand has been there since 1917, and the ground hasn't changed at all since then, and it's all just open terracing. And I think a lot of people feel quite nostalgic about that kind of thing until they actually have to go there. And most people I spoke to were pretty miserable by the end of the game. It was absolutely pouring. There was nowhere to get dry, and it's quite just a bizarre stadium. I mean, I noticed with some Schadenfreude that Hearts were playing there in the middle of December. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. I would recommend the waterproofs because there was puddles everywhere, and it was pretty cold. But all in all, I mean, a brilliant time with the racetrack and the cage around the pitch and everything. It was very unusual. But anyway, these are the tough games that Hibs haven't been winning until recently. So another positive. The
stadium hasn't changed since 1917. Has the style of football changed since 1970?
Actually, to be fair to Cowdenbeath, in the second half, they seem to take some heart out of our goalkeeper being subbed, and we had a 19-year-old laddie come on, Pertino, I can't pronounce his surname, but that young Albanian chap. He's now
Perntrue,
yeah. Oh, you've got the Evening News in front of you, I see. So, he's that was the first time he's played, and he did okay when he came on. But I think the Cowdenbeath players took a bit of heart from the fact that our goalie had been subbed off. They started attacking a lot more in the second half, and Hibs contained it quite well. I think the goal that they did score, yet again, John Robertson. We forgot to put a bet on.
I know.
The first thing I thought.
I said it. How have we not made money off that again?
I mean, it's good that Hibs are winning these games because John Robertson seems to score in every one. But it's one to remember for the next fixture. The goalie had not much chance. It was a great cross into John Robertson. But apart from that, I think he only had one save to make. The defence were quite robust in the second half. But as I was alluding to the start there, I mean the conditions were awful. The pitch itself was in good condition, but it was just driving rain. There was lots of players slipping over. Even Oxley in the first half, kind of the ball slipped out of his hands a couple of times. There was one incident where it looked like he picked the ball up actually outside the box, which was a bit ropey. That was a bit of an error of judgment, but I think. As you guys saw in Tynecastle on Saturday, I mean, goalkeepers can make errors with the ball being so slippy, and these wild 500-to-1 shots can sometimes go in. So I think
I'm glad you changed that to 500 to 1.
Well, the odds are going down every week there. But I'm sure you guys will want to talk about that later. But I think Cowdenbeath just took heart from that. There was a young, untried goalie, and the conditions were awful, and the pitch was getting very heavy towards the end of the game. So Hibs held on well in the second half. In the first half, it was pretty positive. We played as well as we could in the circumstances. Good to see Paul Hanlon scoring. I mean, he's been a key part of our defence recently, which has been letting in fewer goals. And Cummings again, he's scoring quite regularly these days, which can only be positive. Malonga didn't really look like his heart was in it. Possibly didn't look too thrilled to be in Cowdenbeath given his recent international call-up to play for Congo, so he looked like he had his mind on other things. But overall, I mean, Hibs are starting to look like a team with no weak links. There's nobody you'd really single out as being a worry. The only worry is players that are maybe starting to go missing for various reasons.
Liam Craig was back in the midfield. How did that shape up?
No, he played well. I think Liam Craig's a player that a lot of fans get on his back every time he makes a minor mistake, but a lot of his delivery was really good. I mean, he does slow the play down a little, but then in a game like that with the weather and everything, it's kind of what you need, someone to take control in the middle of the park. And his distribution was pretty good, and he made very few mistakes. I still think he'll be dropped immediately for McGeoch whenever he comes back from injury, but it's not undeserved because fans are getting on his back because of past performances and because he's got previous for for letting us down. But he's kind of in an unusual position because he's still the captain, and yet he gets dropped at the first opportunity quite regularly, and he's not really done enough wrong to be stripped of the captaincy as such. So he's in an unusual position. But again, he did his best on Saturday, and I think not a star player, not a standout player, but had a decent performance.
Was it still the narrow diamond of a four in midfield, or it seems that I've seen it suggested that Craig played a wee bit wider midfield than
Yeah.
had been seen against Hearts.
No, it was more like, it wasn't quite, I don't know if this was like a last minute change because of the weather conditions, but it was more like just a three with Handlin sort of sitting behind the two strikers. So I don't know if that was a last minute sort of tactical change from Stubbs, but it did seem to work quite well.
Did Hibs dominate that midfield battle again then in the way? Because obviously Cowdenbeath played sort of 4-5-1, which I've seen a lot of people suggest now in hindsight Hearts should have done for the derby. Did Hibs still dominate the midfield even against the 4-5-1?
I think that's fair to say. I think we were getting a lot of possession and get a lot of service out to the wide players, and one player I wanted to speak about quite a bit was Danny Handling, because yet again Hibs fans are starting to question, his sort of his contribution. He never seems to have a bad game, but on the other hand, you never walk away going, "Oh, it was a fantastic performance from Danny." And I think he's actually, he's a player I want to like, so I don't know if I'm being over generous, but I think he's maybe doing quite a lot of subtle work that you don't necessarily appreciate. A lot of the good runs that, for example, Scott Allan or Lewis Stevenson are making, Handling is the originator of these. Keeping possession and making intelligent passes. Lewis Stevenson in particular seems to find fantastic space. I don't know whether opposition players are underestimating him or whether he's just got a bit more intelligence. His final ball isn't always great, but I think Handlin seems to be getting the ball out to him quite well. And as I said near the start of the show, Scott Allan is just untouchable at the moment. He's playing really, really well.
Anyone else you want to touch on in terms of Hibs? Any specific positives? Any things that worried you from Saturday's game?
I don't think anything particularly worried me. No, I mean, it was a shame to see Oxley going off, and hopefully he'll recover.
Alan Stubbs certainly seems to think that he'll have recovered for the weekend.
I mean, I can't see it being. I mean, it's maybe something to think of longer term. Is that we maybe need a better backup goalkeeper for when things like that do happen. Because although the young lad looked okay, I think in the stands people were a bit nervous, but I don't think that could transmit onto the field because the stand's so far away from the pitch that there was no chance that the nerves sort of leak onto the players. And I said he did okay, but I think in the long run we will need a better backup because it's just got him or Alan Combe, and Oxley's just here on loan, so we really need to start thinking about a plan B in that situation. Aside from that, all round no problems. I mean, Liam Fontaine possibly looks the shakiest out of the four in defence, but he's an experienced head, maybe just not having a good game. But aside from that, I can't really think of any particular worries. I'm sure when we're talking about the Queen of the South game next week, there's the main worries is players that we're going to be missing rather than current problems with the squad.
Okay, so we'll move on to Hearts for now then. Scott, a similar scrappy win for Hearts, but of course it being at home brings a wee bit more pressure to perform. How happy were you with the weekend's result?
Definitely happy. I mean, it was quite a turgid display, to be honest, after the 5th minute. It was a decent strike from Ozturk. The keeper definitely should still be saving those though, but you can't take anything away for the quality of the strike. There was just a few weird decisions. One of them is playing Nicholson in a sort of free role just now. They tried it at Parkhead a few weeks ago,
they did.
And I just don't think he's mature enough to be learning a new position when he's probably not even played a full season in probably his natural wide area. And I felt that Nicholson, Walker and King were all sort of getting involved in the middle of the park, which is where Raith Rovers wanted those guys to be. And what was happening was, because McGee and Eckersley are probably predominantly, great full-backs, but maybe not quite as good as McHattie and Patterson bombing forward, it was leaving us very short in the wide positions, which meant that unfortunately El Hashnouи wasn't really getting much service.
I agree with you on Nicholson, and I actually think Nicholson's potentially suffering this season because he maybe has greater potential than the other wingers. So I think there's a little bit where Nielsen has said to the other wingers, just go and play. Just go, get down the wing, get past your man, put a cross in. I think they're trying to develop Nicholson into something more than that, almost in the way that Brendan Rodgers is with Raheem Sterling, where he wants him to be able to play out in the wing and he wants him to be able to play as a number 10. And I think we saw it at Ibrox where Nielsen mentioned about Nicholson's ability to drive inside and play the through ball, which you wouldn't really see either of the other wingers really having in their locker. And I think just now Nicholson's a wee bit in limbo because they're trying to convert him into this guy who can play all across the front line. but he really just wants to play down the wing like the other guys.
I think he needs a run of consistency though first, before they start chopping and changing with positions. And he's been sort of in and out of a lot of games this season. Great potential, but like any winger his age, there is going to come a lot of inconsistency. And I just feel that maybe this season we should just be concentrating on getting him playing where he's most dangerous, and that's on that left wing, attacking fullbacks, and obviously creating chances for the forwards.
Darren, there's been a bit of a negative reaction to the Hearts' performance at the weekend, despite the conditions and the number of factors. How big a factor for you do you think it was that it was a makeshift attack without a real number 9, despite the fact that El Hasnaoui wears number 9?
Yeah.
He's the furthest thing from it in our squad, probably.
I mean, you're right, he didn't get much service, but even when he did, I mean, his first touch was pretty awful at most of the times. It's very difficult to criticise Robbie Neilson just now. We're top of the league, we've failed to win 2 games, but I thought I was a little bit uncomfortable with him coming out in the press and saying that he was going to use both Wraith Rovers at home and Falkirk away to experiment before the Rangers game. It's a little bit disrespectful, and he's probably quite fortunate it didn't backfire, because we could quite easily have lost an equaliser towards Southampton on Saturday. It was probably the poorest I've seen him this season.
I think we were pretty fortunate that Wraith Rovers spent so much time pressing the game, and they'd done that really well, that it actually left them unable to really have any cutting edge up front. I mean, all they had was Callum Elliott playing like the little 14-year-old that he always has played, and whinging and thumping the ground when he wasn't getting a free kick for diving. I just felt like I was watching the Callum Elliott of 2007 all over again.
It is funny though, because you still watch him and now and again he picks up the ball and you think, oh, you could be a half decent player, and then you think, I've thought that about you so many times before. You've let me down so many times. On the subject of potential Robbie Neilson mistakes, I was interested to read in the evening news tonight. I like how open Neilson is, how much of the game he talks, how he keeps it on football all the time. But sometimes I wonder that he maybe shows a few too many of his cards. He spoke today about Ozturk's goal, which we'll touch on here, and the fact that is something we're playing for Ozturk to be able to stride forward and open the game up a little bit, and his ability to draw a man now and maybe play a pass. Do we think that talking about that tactic quite so openly is maybe giving people a week or two to prepare for it?
I think that just shows the great sort of belief that he has in his players. I think he probably believes, and rightly so at this stage, I mean, we are undefeated and top of the league. I think he believes that our players are good enough that even if the other team have a way of trying to stop us, we've got players with the ability to get past that and find a way to get the 3 points or just nick a goal. And that's what happened on Saturday. It wasn't a great performance, but at no stage was I sitting there and going, God, they're going to get back into this. It didn't. It just looked like a 1-0 game from the 5th minute onwards.
Darren, Connor thinks Aleem Ozturk is a fluke merchant. How big a weapon is he for us going forward now he's established his long range ability though?
Especially now he's got the confidence as well. I found it quite funny on Saturday how just before he had the shot that eventually scored with, everyone had screamed shoot, and he actually played quite a good ball into the box. And I think El Hasnaoui, shockingly enough, had a terrible first touch and just ran away. But no, I mean, it is a weapon, but I think teams should probably be conscious of that now, but I worry a little bit that we're becoming quite predictable anyway. I think teams know how to set themselves up against us. I think we'll get away with it against the part-time teams because they'll not be able to press us, but Wraith Rovers pressed us really hard in the second half especially, which was quite an interesting tactic because you would think they would probably do that in the first half. But they pushed us really hard in the second half, and one point kind of stuck in my mind especially was Neil Alexander was still looking for that short out ball. He was looking for the left back or the right back. This was after Eckersley's gone off injured, and I mean, as much as I like the fact that we're playing good football and on the deck most weeks, sometimes a long pass or just putting it up the field is sometimes what you have to do. I just worry that we are almost guilty of becoming a little bit like Hibs under Mowbray, where we can play great football, but I think we're just starting to become very pedestrian and predictable now.
The problem, I know what you mean, but I think the problem we had on Saturday again comes back to the lack of options up front. That we did, to a certain extent, we did panic at points and launch it, and we found that actually that's a far less successful way of getting us out of trouble than passing, because with Keatings and Holt up there, it just came right back at us, and we did really at those times we may need a conventional target man. and with the injuries we've got now, we've nothing even close to it. How important is it, Scott, that we get the variety of options back for particularly the Rangers game?
I mean, I think I've said this since the first show. Having so up front it is so important to us. It's so important to the spine of the team. So Wilson, Alexander, Boabin and Gomez, if we've got those 5 guys playing week in, week out, I'm confident that we'll win more games than we'll lose, regardless of the league, whether it's this league or the SPL. And then obviously the other positions can fill themselves. But and we are missing Carrick as well. Carrick would have been a decent replacement for So, because Carrick's actually got, he has built himself up over the last 18 months. He's quite physical. He can put himself about against the best of the centre halves. Keaton's unfortunately isn't the type of guy that can really feed off. He has to feed off scraps from sort of playing alongside someone like So or Carrick. And El Hashnui, he is a number 10, and he's also a number 10 that's struggling for confidence and match sharpness just now. So it was very hard to ask him to play that role, and I did feel a bit sorry for him when he got brought off early, because I felt like, I know why Robbie Neilson done it, and I felt like it was the right decision for the player to get him off before the fans really turned on him, but in some respects it did make him look like a bit of a scapegoat as well.
There was an element of giving Keating's game time as well, but I think we were all happy to see with the big games coming up, because there are a couple of particularly tricky games coming up. Final points on Hearts then. It was mentioned there, we were without our captain in Danny Wilson, and the back line was fairly makeshift. Darren, how did you feel they came through what ended up being a fairly stiff test, although admittedly against a team who didn't really fashion too many actual clear-cut chances?
Yeah, okay. I was slightly more panicked than you were in the last 10 minutes ago, just because we were down at 10 men, and it was one of those games where last season we probably would have lost a goal there, and I'm still struggling to get out of that mentality. I was thinking, but I'm normally pretty critical of Brad Mackay, but I thought he was solid enough. And they coped quite well. There's 2 ways of looking at it. One, you can worry that we're maybe starting to look a bit predictable, but on the other hand, it's another game where we've not played very well at all, but we've won.
Yeah.
So if we keep on winning games, I don't think too many of us will be complaining about it at the end of the season.
Scott?
Yeah, if you're to talk to most Hearts fans, at the start of the season and say name your back 4, only one guy out of that back 4 would have probably made it in most players' teams, most fans' teams. So,
and even he was that subject of a large question mark.
Yeah, so
until Easter Road.
When you look at it that way, it's great to get a clean sheet. I felt that Alexander again, he's in terms of his vocal sort of performance during a match, he's always talking to the back line. He's always telling them, play it long, play it short, keep it simple. And I think probably if there was one thing that I felt that we were lacking a little bit, I felt that sometimes Mackay especially, it may be down to maybe just a little lack of belief because he's not played a lot of first team football this season, but he did seem to use Gomez quite a lot for just a short pass when probably somebody like El Hashnui or Walker was actually shown well for the ball. So maybe wait a few more games, you might see a bit more confidence in Mackay's game in terms of coming sort of out for the back line. But in terms of his defending, he was fine. He's always fairly solid, to be fair, and when he's got someone next to him who's got a bit more experience, then I've got no problems with Mackay playing in the team.
It is a point that I feel as Hearts fans we have to keep stressing, though, this idea that we are actually really good defensively now, because a lot of people seem to very quickly forget, as you suggested there, Darren, and it does go back to the default mode of we'll lose a goal here because Hearts lose goals here, and it's only when you actually look at the league table and you realise like we're conceding a 1 goal every second game. That's unheard of for a Hearts defence, and it's a Hearts defence that actually still comes in for a fair bit of criticism. People aren't hugely confident in us, despite the fact that it's the best defence in the league by a considerable distance, I think, at this moment in time. On the subject of both teams in differing form but coming up with the same results at the weekend, let's talk about this coming weekend. Hibs are at home at Easter Road to Queen of the South, a team who they lost to away from home. Is it a different Hibs team that heads into this affair at Easter Road?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think we were on a slightly bad run the last time we played Queen of the South, and probably underestimated them as well at the same time. I think that was our last really bad result. I think since then, since September, we've picked up quite a bit, and so it will be a different different Hibs team. I know Queen of the South are quite an exciting side to watch because they score a lot of goals, but they also have a slightly leaky defence. I watched their game against Wraith Rovers last month on BBC Alba, and that was a really entertaining match. And the thing that sort of worries me about Queen of the South is they had this kind of never say die attitude. I think they scored in the 94th minute, which obviously if they're so persistent against Hibs could cause us problems. But I think Saturday's obviously a really important game because I think if we win that convincingly, that puts us in a joint third position. I think that'll be us up there for the rest of the season. I think we just need to get over this game and show that we are better than the other teams challenging for playoff positions. I'm quite looking forward to the match. There is a problem with our striker being out. Obviously Malonga's off for international duty, so there's a question there, and I was trying to think of what the answer could be. I mean, I'm not sure if Cummings is quite. Well, he's obviously.
Is Heffernan the answer?
That's the answer. That was the answer I was trying to avoid.
If Heffernan is the answer, what is the question?
Yeah, good point. I mean, to be fair to Heffernan, he came on as a sub a little while ago and had a decent game, and I think he had a couple of decent games and he scored in one of them. So I think Heffernan as a sub is possibly a decent bet. I don't think he's got 90 minutes left in him. I think keeping him on standby is probably the right idea. But as I was saying earlier, and this might be a slightly unpopular choice, but I think Danny Handling, maybe he's supposed to be a striker. I think maybe sticking him up a wee bit, particularly if McGeoch's back in a squad. I think putting Handling up front along with Cummins might be quite an exciting strike force, and also this could be Hanlon's time to shine because he hasn't done a lot of notable things. He's had a few decent games, but he hasn't had that sort of standout match where everyone's like, oh, he's a really sort of a great prospect up and coming. So a lot of it is dependent on whether McGeoch's back. I think if we're down McGeoch and Malonga, then we're starting to sort of find a few problems. Although we do have quite a lot of midfielders or wingers on the bench. Matthew Kennedy and Sam Stanton are two players I'd really like to see starting if we were sort of facing a bit of a thin squad. We also have the young chap Jake Sinclair from Southampton.
He was a name I was going to mention because he came in with quite a lot of fanfare.
Yeah,
but he's offered fairly little so far.
I don't really understand getting a player in on loan and then never playing him. I don't really get that. He's still a young lad, and I spoke to. I've got a mate, he's a Southampton fan, and he said he's sort of been on the fringes of that team for a few years now. So you think if he's on the fringes of the Southampton team, he'd be good enough to play for Hibs, but I don't actually know anything about him. Maybe he's Stubbs' secret weapon. Maybe he'll come out on Saturday. I think he's by all accounts he's he's got a good attitude and he's quite quick. He's a little short, but apart from that, should offer some good prospects. So I'm a bit confused as to why we've not seen him, and he might be another one that is called in place of Malonga on Saturday.
So what's your score prediction?
I think it's going to be an exciting game. I think if McGeoch plays, I think we'll definitely win. I'll go for 2-1 Hibs. However, I just feel like, as I said, if we win this, then that's us in the top 3 for the rest of the season. I feel like Hibs have always got a trick up their sleeve. I think there's always, things have been going well for a while, and I hate to be pessimistic, but I just feel like things have been going too well for a couple of months now, and if we were missing a few players, I could see maybe a high scoring draw, maybe 2-2. Which, I don't want to be negative, but I think Queen of the South are a good team.
That's going to be in your headstone, by the way.
I'm not...
I hate to be pessimistic.
I hate to be pessimistic. But,
you were so optimistic about the last time you played Queen of the South.
That's it. And that came back to haunt me. So... Queen of the South are a good team, and they're above us for a good reason. And I think Saturday would be a good opportunity to show that the start of the season is not reflective of where we are now, and I think that's largely true. But I just feel like, especially at home, even though we've been unbeaten for a while, there have been a few sort of stumbling draws, and if we are missing a few key players, that may well happen again, especially with the sort of persistence that Queen of the South tend to show.
Darren, what's the Jambo perspective on Hibs' chances this weekend? Do you think they can lay down a marker, as Connor suggests?
Well, I was going to ask you, Claire, earlier on, do you think that Stubbs has kind of got a grip of things now and kind of knows or has an idea of who his best 11 is?
Yeah, I think
it would seem from an outsider's point of view that you're certainly improving.
I think definitely. I think the rotating squad that he had for a few months has stopped. He's got he's got a clear idea of who gets his first name on the team sheet. And a lot of the players that he was experimenting with have hit quite a great run of form recently. So I think, compared to the last Queen of the South game back in September, I think, he really has got a grip of things. He understands the league a bit more. He's put a bit more sort of mentality into the squad. So I do think that we're a different team to the last time we played Queen of the South.
You've obviously had that a kind of sticky start to the season at home, but I've always thought that at some point the quality that Hibs have got would eventually kind of shine through, and I can see them kind of going on quite a good run at Easter Road now.
I think so, and I was kind of a bit worried that we had a couple of glamorous games where we played really well, and I was kind of worried that we'd come back down to earth with a bump with some of these sort of lower, or not even, Queen of the South were higher than us, but slightly less glamorous games. So I think it's important to take Saturday really seriously and remember that Queen of the South are above us and that we need to fire on.
I have to say I take issue with your definition of glamorous, because I don't think either Edinburgh team really faces any glamour ties this season.
I was talking about Dundee United. That was pretty glamorous.
Yes, they are partial to a night out in Glasgow's glamorous West End. I've heard the Dundee United lads. What are your views on this weekend's game at the Falkirk Stadium? Darren, nail your colours to the mast.
Well, I don't know if the fear of the Joe Jordan 6-0 games coming back to haunt me or something now, but it's made me think back to a record at both Brockville before and now the Falkirk Stadium is not all that great. I think we've got a great opportunity on Saturday to show live on the TV as well that the last couple of games, although we've got results out of them, the kind of loss of form is just a blip, and it would be incredibly important for us to at least, if we get a win, then when it comes to that Rangers game, we're still top of the league regardless of what happens. So I think it takes on quite a bit of significance this weekend. I fear that we might lose our unbeaten record, but only because I'm a complete pessimist, probably.
Scott?
Well, just to touch on the Hibs game first, I actually would have been predicting a score draw, and it's not that I'm trying to play down how well Hibs have been playing recently, but it's actually I do rate Queen of the South as quite a decent side, and if anyone's going to get there in the top four with Hearts, Rangers and Hibs, it's going to be them. I think Holt, Higgins and Russell are three very dangerous players. I don't think Hibs will toil so much without Malonga, because I think the way Stubbs wants them to play, they're very comfortable with the ball in the deck, so I don't think missing his sort of more physical aspect to the game will actually hurt them at all. So I would probably say a score draw for that. As for Hearts, as long as So and Wilson are back, I do think we should be winning this game, probably 3-1. I do think Falkirk's probably poorest area. Their game is probably the back four, especially the two full-back positions. Dick that plays at left back, and I think Maybury's kind of been in and out the team at right back. I know he started against us at Tynecastle, hopefully again on Sunday, Saturday, because Nicholson could do with a decent performance, and I think he'd have a better chance up against Alan Maybury. So yeah, I do reckon Hearts 3-1.
When we did our quarterly predictions, I said this would be the first game that we would drop points in. Obviously that's blown out the water already because we dropped a couple of points at Easter Road, but I've still got a slight fear about the Falkirk Stadium. I've just got weird memories of that place. I absolutely hate going there.
I remember watching Jamie Moe and Cal Melly up front together one Monday night, and it was hell.
But I always flash back to 2005, 2006 and going there, and the Stephen Presley own goal that put us 2 goals down, and Craig Gordon having been sent off already, and we actually managed to rescue a draw there. But I've got a wee sneaky feeling that it might be a similar kind of scrap this weekend. I hope that we can get out with a win, because I think for everyone it's a positive thing if we go into the game against Rangers flying, and it really, if we can then go in positively and beat Rangers, as we will discuss at great length in the preview show next week, it then blows the league wide open again, because it really starts to ask questions about Ali McCoist and sets Rangers back a fair bit.
It gets Hibs a lot closer to Rangers as well.
It does. It opens that whole question up again.
The second, third, fourth thing is very important come the end of the season. If Hibs were to finish second, you've then only got to manage the final and then the Premier League team. You're not having to go through the semi-final, and I think that's quite a big, especially if it was a team like Queen of the South. You wouldn't want to go and play them away on that artificial surface. you know, in the away leg, you know, coming up for a semi-final. So I know Hibs fans and some of the players in that, there's always a lot of talk about catching Hearts, but Rangers come first. Well, Queen of the South come first. Rangers are then second. So if Hearts did get a positive result in a couple of weeks, that'd be also very good news for Hibs.
Darren, what is your score prediction first for Hearts versus Falkirk?
I don't want to be too pessimistic. I'm going to go with, I don't think it'll be quite the 2-2 drama of that game that you were referring to back in 2006. I think maybe a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. Okay, what about for Hibs at home to Queen of the South?
I think Hibs will win 3-1.
3-1. You're confident about Hibs?
More confident about Hibs than that, but Hearts, which probably says, I don't know what that says about me.
Connor, what's your prediction for Falkirk versus Hearts?
I think Falkirk are going to win 1-0. I think Hearts have been poor in the last 2 games. I tried to watch the highlights from Saturday.
That you could find it.
So I can find it. I could only see one very poor footage of the goal on Hearts TV. But by the way, I was listening to it on sort of open all mics, and they were saying it was Hearts got off pretty lightly. So I think as I said after the derby, I thought Hearts played quite poorly for a lot of the derby too, and I just think that's 2 games now, and I think this may be the game that it catches up with them. So I think Falkirk are going to win 1-0. I think that's my prediction for that game.
And the most important question: will you be rushing away from Easter Road to get yourself in front of BBC Alba to watch the game?
Oh, I won't. I'm actually going to London this weekend to see Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that's something a bit else.
What, personally, or are you going to see him?
He's called me down.
Fill us in on that one a wee bit.
I'm going to. My wife bought me a present as a ticket to go and see An Evening with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So. I went to An Evening with Sylvester Stallone at the start of the year, so I've seen the big 2 now. So
I think this must be the glamour of Connor, which I found.
This is so unfortunately.
This is for that show.
Glamour.
I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping to walk away inspired, and then the week after, when I come on, I'm going to be full of really positive sort of will to power energy for Hibs. But I'm hoping to catch it on Hibs TV on the train down. We'll see. I don't think Hibs TV's been very good with the streaming games this year.
So Connor's away this weekend, but he'll be back. Yes, absolutely nailed it. It's 11:09, but I'm still on. Right, so we will wrap up. I think this is the closest to 11 o'clock that we've finished in ages. So given that, I'll do a wee bit promotion. We are attempting to start a blog. Scott and myself have both posted 2 there so far, but we are looking for any contributions that anyone would like to give us about Edinburgh football in general, whether you focus on either Hearts and Hibs or one of the other clubs, one of the amateur clubs. We heard from Spartans last week. Any input like that would be great. That can be found at Monday Night Fitba, FITBA.wordpress.com if you want to read what we've put on there already, and get in touch with us on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Monday Night Football, to volunteer your services if you're interested in contributing. Equally, if you want to appear on the panel any given time, give us a shout on Facebook. We'll get back in touch and we can certainly arrange for that to happen. We're always looking to add to our lineup of guests, as we have done very successfully with Darren this week.
Thank you.
We'll certainly have you back. So all that remains for me to say is thanks very much for joining me, guys.
Cheers.
And thank you for listening. Stay tuned on Radio Saltire for a night of music. Goodbye.